everyone. I am Luis Abesamis. I am a research fellow at the Decolonial Studies program of the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies. Welcome to our roundtable discussion this afternoon entitled Resisting the Coloniality of Gender in the Philippines. No? Welcome sa ating mga guests sa Zoom. Thank you for registering. No, we hope you have a wonderful learning experience this afternoon, no? Um, just to start, no, siguro a bit of background why we are hosting this roundtable discussion. No? So the Decolonial Studies program, which was established in 2019, hopes to foster dialogue and collaboration, not just within the academe but also with other sectors of, you know, Philippine society to better understand how colonialism and coloniality is affecting our everyday lives, as well as the more complex social structures and issues that, Philippine society is contending with. In particular, this roundtable discussion hopes to foster dialogue among Filipino scholars engaged in gender studies in the country and explore how we have all been contending with and addressing the coloniality of gender and gender issues within our specific fields, no, because we're all interdisciplinary scholars here, but also through our own scholarship, no? And so we're just to start or provide a bit more of a starting point for everyone in the Zoom, no? So when we talk about coloniality, I personally use Maldonado Torres's definition, which defines coloniality as long-standing patterns of power that emerge not only as a result of colonialism, but continues to inform culture and labor, our social relations, and even knowledge production. No? Even if, for instance, the Philippines is no longer occupied, no, or no, baka that is something we will also unpack later on. Just a bit of house rules before I introduce our panelists and get into the discussion points, no? So please keep your microphones muted. We do have an opportunity later on to share questions, no? If you have questions while we are discussing, feel free to put it in the chat and we will address them later during the Q&A, no? All right. So before we get to the discussion questions, let me just introduce our panelists very quickly, no? So panelists, you can just wave hi and you can even open your mic and say hi when I call you, no? So siguro by order of how you are arranged on my Zoom screen, no? So Dr. Veronica Gregorio is a lecturer at the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at the National University of Singapore. They earned their PhD in psychology from the same institution and their Masters of Arts in Women and Development from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her research interests include gender and sexuality, family, agrarian change, and visual research methods. Hi, Doc Nikki.
Everyone, magandang hapon.
Okay, lovely to have you po. No? Next, we have Malaya. Malaya Lapina is a trans Pinay from Davao City. She is a BS Anthropology graduate from the University of the Philippines, Mindanao. Currently, she is a faculty member at the same institution under the Department of Social Sciences, teaching courses such as visual anthropology, Mindanao studies, sex and culture, and gender and literature. She is also the current education and research officer of STRAP, or the Society of Trans Women of the Philippines. Her scholarly and creative works center around trans realities in Mindanao, the intersection of queer and trans anthropology and literature, trans spaces, and trans pleasures and desires. She is one of the recipients of the UP-CWGS Research Grant for 2024 for her project Transitioning Bodies, Transitioning Narratives, and Experiences of Trans Pinays in Davao City, Mindanao. Welcome, Malaya.
Hello, everyone. Maayong hapon sa tanay.
Hey. All right, next we have Dr. Sharmila Parmanan. Doc Sharms is an assistant professor in gender development and globalization at the London School of Economics and Political Sciences Department of Gender Studies. They earned their PhD in gender studies from the University of Cambridge. Their research examines the colonial histories and gendered logics that underpin development, and humanitarian interventions in the Global South, with a focus on politics of knowledge production and feminist entanglements with the state on issues such as migration, gender-based violence, precarious labor, economic restructuring, and social protection. Hi, Charms.
Hello, hi everyone. Really happy to be chatting with you today.
Yay. Thank you for joining us. Last but not least, we have Xavier Bilon. Xavier is an assistant professor of statistics at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, from which he obtained his Master of Science in Statistics and Bachelor of Science in Electronics and Communications Engineering. Currently, he is also the Director of Research at the UP School of Statistics and the school's Director for Extension Services and External Linkages from the years 2022 to 2023. At present, he also serves as the project leader of the UP Rainbow Research Hub, a pioneering collaboration among academic, professional, and advocacy institutions that seek to make a difference for the LGBTQI plus community in the Philippines through better LGBTQI scholarship and research. He has previously worked as the national consultant on HIV and LGBTI of the United Nations Development Program. And at present, Xavier's research direction is on social research methods, computational statistics, and applied social statistics with a focus on digital data and data on gender, sexuality, and human rights. Hi, Xavier.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Luis, and glad to share this space with our other panelists.
Yes, welcome. Thank you, everyone, for making time and for being so willing to share your insights and your perspectives and experiences. So let's just get into it so that we have more time for discussion and questions later. Siguro, just to start, and anyone can answer, whoever wants to go first. Siguro, as a gender studies scholar in the Philippines, what are some colonial logics, and forces that you contend with in your work? No. So, is there someone who would like to get start or get the ball rolling? Charms, would you like to start us off?
Sure, yes. So, um, obviously, I want to acknowledge that I was born and grew up in the Philippines. I did my undergrad in the Philippines, but now I am teaching in a global North university, and that's something I'm happy to further interrogate. But what I have encountered first is, I think the biggest challenge is the whole political economy of knowledge production. Because the way we produce knowledge about gender, it's not a neutral or an innocent process, right? Like, who is considered credible? Who do you need to cite for your paper to get published? For example, who do you need to know to talk about your paper? Who gets research funding? And all of these things matter. I mean, the fact that uh, a lot of like popular academic research is in English, already means that there's a loss of meaning, and there's a lot that's irretrievable in translation there, right? So that's the first thing, and it leads to things like very uncritical impositions of the binary or the LGBT framework in making sense of lived realities that don't quite correspond to them. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is the politics of representation also, which is a bit related, but the way third world women, for example, are written about in dominant development literatures. They are seen as passive, helpless, uneducated people who need to be saved or who need to be rescued. And that's also problematic. There's a shift now. Maybe they don't need to be saved. Maybe they are hyper agentic. And maybe if we invest in them, they will save themselves and their families and their communities, right? And I think the last one, which we can discuss further, is this understanding of gender, kind of that sees women as a fixed and unified category, which I find to be quite problematic. So this imagination that there's this global sisterhood, but we need to unpack this because how are the priorities decided in this global sisterhood? For example, whose voices dominate, whose interests dominate, especially if we look at colonial history. White women never treated women from other colonized peoples as equal to them. The status was not the same, right? And these are things I'm happy to like talk about in more detail later, but I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, lots of very salient points, no? So girl, Malaya, would you like to share naman your perspective? Yeah.
Yeah, again, thank you, everyone for coming sa roundtable, ano. And yeah, I kinda I agree with Dr. Parmanan, no, dun sa point about dun sa whole politics, no, of it. But for me, I think of myself as a trans studies scholar, and particularly what I'm doing as a trans anthropology. So the first question is, sino nagpo-produce uh, ng mga classic, quote unquote, anthropological discussion on transness, specifically in the Philippines? So who is writing about us? Sino yung nag-aaral about our experiences? Yun yung unang question. So yun yung unang kailangang masagot. Because for me, no, magkakaroon lang, minsan kasi parang maraming mga taong nag-claim no, na they are gender studies scholar. They're using gender as a lens. But kulang no, yung paghimay kung ano ba talagang ibig sabihin when you queer something, when you trans something, when you're using gender as part of your research. May mga ganun kailangang tingnan. And for me, I'm very sensitive about the voice no in these researches, no, especially if these researches about trans women are written by cis heterosexual men, no, white men in a particular, that they are they kind of imposing a hegemonic understanding of our life, and that's very problematic for me. So, one so yeah, I think that's the problem, no? And this Western concept of transness in particular, no, how can we parang counter that thing? So yun, so I think yun yung parang factor no, na una kong napapansin no, when we talk about the colonial or colonial or coloniality of a gender in a general. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Doc Nikki, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Totally agree, with Sharms and Malaya on the said points. But maybe I can give a specific example because the question is about like things that we contend in our work, right? So I think one important aspect for me is really debunking notions of modernity and productivity as well. So I actually explored how colonial and capitalist ideologies have shaped the conception of laziness, particularly in rural context, no? And how these ideas actually continue to influence the way we see ourselves. And this is based on my PhD project. So I examined this within frameworks of, education, labor, future aspirations. And I think it's important really when we do debunking of these specific notions na we contextualize projects, right? Historically and the socioeconomic conditions around this project. So in the project that I'm talking about, I actually discussed how due to the feminization of factory work and migration, there's a whole narrative that contrasts, the image of hardworking, modern woman versus there's the lazy rural men, right? And this narrative is rooted in very colonial and capitalist ideals, di ba? Na it encourages young women to embrace modernity by pursuing labor export-oriented education. And then, kapag naiwan naman yung mga kabataang kalalakihan sa rural, they're seen as lazy. So that conception of modernity and productivity is one thing that I am trying to show in my work. So that's one example. Like so actually challenging the stereotypes, right? And revaluing agricultural labor, and recognizing the importance of rural livelihood. So that's one thing at least that I I do in my work. Yeah. And maybe later I can give other examples, but for now, just that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Doc Nikki. Xavier, would you like to share what you're doing naman in the field of statistics?
Yeah, actually very interesting. I'm not sure if surprised kayo na may statistician dito sa panel, but I'm really glad to join our discussion this afternoon. We don't usually talk about or think about colonialism in our field sa statistics. In fact, pag tinignan mo yung curricula ng different statistics programs dito sa bansa and in other countries, there isn't much a discussion about the development of like the statistical thought, the historical context, pati na rin yung social changes, kung paano siya nakaapekto sa kung ano yung statistics ngayon. But there are some efforts globally to trace the racist and imperialist origins ng statistics. Hindi ko alam kung familiar kayo sa some of these names, pero si Francis Galton, siya yung nag-develop ng regression toward the mean. So kung nagli-linear regression kayo, siya yun, standard deviation, siya yung nag-develop. You have Carl Pearson, siya yung sa chi-squared test, correlation coefficient, principal component analysis. Then you have Ronald Fisher, F-test, exact test, yun yung mga common sa kanya. ANOVA and p-value. And itong mga tests na ito, hindi sila nabuo out of nowhere. They were actually developed by these people to show superiority of one group, particularly of white men, over the others. And comes with this is the underlying and unquestioned assumption of positivism, na yung knowledge ay objective and can be discovered only through observation and experimentation, and arguably a Western formalized philosophy. And yung problem dito, I think, is that it ignores the reality and even absolves statisticians and data analysts from the numerous decisions we make, often reasonable, but most of the time arbitrary, about how to operationalize the problem or how do we get an answer. What gets measured, ano yung i-measure, paano siya i-measure, ano yung i-control na factors, paano i-analyze yung data, yung mga models na ginagamit, like yung p-value, bakit siya less than 0.05 dapat. And all these decisions that we make may lead to different conclusions. And I think yung problem dito, primarily, is that racist, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic values ng isang researcher, knowingly or unknowingly, may produce knowledge that carries and perpetuates these same values. And sa statistics, medyo prevalent yung idea of positivism. And if it remains unchallenged, if we assume that it is the only way to know, then itong mga tools na ito, na legacies ng colonialism and imperialism, may be used to continue broadening inequalities between peoples, genders, and sexualities. And researchers usually, sa mga quantitative, they see like distancing themselves from the participants as necessarily a good thing. Will this allow actually folks to participate in the knowledge production process and co-produce knowledge na relevant and meaningful para sa kanila? I do have some examples here, pero siguro mamaya na lang. Nabanggit na rin yung iba, like for example, yung mga labels natin about LGBT, kung paano siya minimeasure when it comes to surveys. And then we have the idea of indices and rankings, yung mga country level rankings when it comes to LGBT equality. Meron tong underlying colonial tones na maaaring hindi natin napapansin because we think of statistics as objective, na parang sila yung truth, di ba? Pag kung ano yung nakuha natin, yun necessarily yung truth. So mamaya I'm willing to share more and discuss about those ideas. Pero yun yung medyo, I think, pinagagalingan din nung field ng statistics at paano siguro mahirap or mahirap i-contend with yung coloniality when it comes to statistics.
Right, right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so far now what I'm hearing is we have, at least in terms of gender studies, coloniality as it relates to our practices. No, who are we citing? No, if we are the ones doing research, no, who are we in the first place? No, is it our place to do research? How are we doing the research? Who are we doing it with? We also have questions or concerns about how gender and gender issues are made sense of, right? What are the categories we're using? What are the logics that underpin those kinds of categories? Are they fixed? Are they flexible, right? And then you also have just in general sort of the politics of knowledge production, right? The kinds of measures that we're using, the kinds of systems that we're operating in, and how much of it uh, have we leveraged towards gender justice or decolonization, and how much of it continues to be colonial and imperialist. No? Thank you for sharing. No, siguro, because we're talking a lot about how we're making sense of issues and how our practices inform how we make issues, I guess what I'm interested in understanding and exploring is how you all have sort of um, made sense of how your own fields have responded to, or even just made sense of the coloniality of gender, whether it's in statistics, in trans studies, development work, or agrarian studies. So maybe we can start with Doc Nikki.
Hi again. Yes, I think when we talk about how the field has responded, actually sa Philippines, very responsive naman talaga ang gender studies programs. I would say actually yung my training in UP Diliman sa Women and Development Department, talagang inclusive, very reflexive, and of course, it's not representative of all the gender studies program, but what I'm saying is that kind of practice, no, it's useful, it's helpful for us, and it's productive. So I think a part of responses ng mga programs ay uh, emphasis on collaboration, no, collaborative learning, collaborative knowledge production. That's very important kasi you're trying to really break down colonial legacies by embracing multiple perspectives and recognizing others, right, as collaborators. So I think that's one thing na nakikita naman natin. We see this in the programs that are very active as well. Actually, this program itself, this webinar itself, right? It's a response. So, yeah, it's a good thing. And I guess another thing would be yung mga localized kind of workshops and conferences na nagko-connect sa mga Global South scholars. That's one thing that I can see happening actually recently, no? Parang there's a series of conferences in Southeast Asia. And I think that's very good. Na, the location of the conference says a lot about how the knowledge, production is developing as well. So I think those 2 points from me.
Mhm. And before we go to another panelist, I just wanted to know, Doc Nikki, in terms of sociology or like even agrarian studies, um, how has uh, how have these fields sort of made sense of colonialism, coloniality, and where are we at today when we talk about the sociology of coloniality or coloniality in agrarian studies?
Mhm, mhm. Kung sa Philippines, I would say medyo nasa early stages pa tayo. So conversations are very different if you compare it to Malaysia. They've been talking about in sociology departments in Malaysia kung paano decoloniality ay pwedeng i-apply sa mga research projects, right? Ng students from undergrads hanggang PhD level. But sa Philippines, it's in very early stages, I would say. And it's a good thing, because it means that it's happening. It's ongoing. And actually, yung conference this year, I think yung overarching na tema niya, 'di ba, ay on decoloniality as well. Or can you correct me if baka
Yes.
mali yung naalala ko? Yeah. And that's important. That's one thing na
Mhm.
kailangang i-acknowledge. We're in the early stages, but it's good. Baby
Right.
steps, right? And to prepare for that conference, may mga webinars, may mga in-person events, yung Philippine Sociological Society, and yeah, that's how you start the conversations, right? So, and in terms of agrarian studies, you said
Yes.
you're asking about that as well. It's a bit different. So, in my
Mhm.
observation, wala pa masyado. There are works na parang related lang, critique of coloniality in terms of the history of agriculture sa Philippines, and we know that's a lot, right? But solid programs or projects like this one, not so much pa. Yeah.
Thank you po for sharing. Charms, would you like to go next?
Um, so hi. So my discipline is actually very anti-discipline. It's multidisciplinary gender studies. Within that, I think my intellectual home would be more feminist scholarship, although I also do work in queer studies, but I am more comfortable in feminist scholarship. Um, and the next one would be, in particular, recently gender and development. And the things, so the directions that have been taken, and this is in no way to say that they're enough, right? Is really to insist that gender is not a solitary category, that it exists alongside and in complex interrelationships with other systems and markers of hierarchy and identification. So like race, class, religion, disability. Why is this insistence important, right? So one example would be the conversation on reproductive rights, which in some ways is a bit of a really frustrating conversation, because what we need to do with this conversation is kind of reckon with the colonial legacies of reproductive rights na nagsimula ito from neo-Malthusian impulses, 'di ba? Na parang certain bodies, certain populations need to be curbed because there's too many of them. And the way the problem has been framed is overactive wombs, or like women need to be educated, they don't know any better. It's a resource, I mean, it's an overpopulation issue rather than as a resource distribution issue, right? And obviously, feminists were able to reframe this to a question of social justice and equity. But if we take on a very like liberal Western paradigm of individual choice here, and we divorce this from broader conversations of economic redistribution or imperialism, or of obligations of global North countries to global South countries. Like, we cannot blame global South women for climate change because they have quote unquote more kids than the global average. When historically that responsibility lay with global North countries. So this conversation on individual rights to one's body cannot be divorced from broader collective conversations about economic redistribution and structural issues, right? So that's kind of one example. And that's where the conversation on gender really has to be intersectional. Another example might be increasingly a recognition that the gender binary has been historically enforced through structural violence. It's not natural. It's not ahistorical. It has not been there from the beginning of time. And there are great explanations from statisticians about how the discipline has been complicit in this, from demographers as well. And even in the Philippines, we have evidence of more expansive and fluid gender identities and norms that have predated colonization. Of course, it's really tricky. And I think the way we ask the questions here is also really important, because the problem with colonization is it not only takes away things from us materially, it also like erased knowledge. It erased entire knowledge systems, right? Like, and so some of these vocabularies are irretrievable. It's not like we can kind of snap our fingers and recover them. So it's kind of, we can't even like fully decolonize our minds. There's no such thing as a quote unquote fully decolonized mind, right? So kind of sitting with that discomfort, but at the same time, recognizing that lived realities don't map into like colonial categories necessarily. So in the realm of feminist organizing or LGBT organizing, kind of pushing back against those boxes, pushing back against donor-driven priorities and categorizations, and insisting that I guess it's like resources that should be distributed, but agendas should be community-driven and be more participatory. So that's kind of another thrust in gender and development. I mean, I'll stop here, but there are other examples that we can discuss in the Q&A.
Thank you for sharing. I guess this would be a good time to also share that I really resonate with what these Charms is sharing, because I work in public health, where we also have to contend with um, sort of, looking at gender both as a sort of axis of health inequalities, but in terms of the gender dimensions of health, or even the colonial dimensions of both gender and health, are not really problematized in the public health and medical spheres, no? And particularly how medicine and public health continues to reinforce the gender binary, even if both public health and medicine have shown that in reality, even biology is not as rigid as male female. No, and so I'm glad that that was also raised because that is continued um structural violence, especially for a lot of folks who again live realities um, don't fall neatly within these categories, right? And so I guess this would be a good time, no, to segue into Malaya, who does a lot of work in trans studies, no? Figure in your perspective, how has trans studies or even Mindanao studies sort of been contending with coloniality, especially how we make sense of gender issues?
Yeah. For me, it's important to recognize, as coming from the discipline of anthropology, that anthropology, in its history is really colonial and racist, no, in its history. So we need to really recognize the contribution of anthropology to this whole shenanigans of colonization whatsoever. But for me, no, it is also important to really assert na in the Philippines, we can really say that there's no trans anthropology, or even trans studies in the Philippines for now. It's because it is lumped, in the queer studies or gender studies in that context, and we really need to assert that in order to decolonize this thinking about trans women and these trans individuals, trans identities, we need first to build what we can call as Philippine trans studies. No, na one way of doing that is unpacking, no, interrogating these trans identities from pre-colonial time, from indigenous people, indigenous communities. Now we need to unpack, how these communities, how pre-colonial Filipinos understand the non-binary identities, trans identities, and whatsoever. I think the first, I think uh, the challenge, no, in doing that is we need to really question this whole idea of LGBTQIA plus as the main framework of understanding our different identities, sexualities, or and everything. So we need to really question, is LGBTQIA plus framework or the SOGSC framework applicable or appropriate to the Philippine context. So we need to really understand or unpack that, because there's no discussion, or there's no robust discussion about that kind of question, and we need to do that. Because for me, in one way of doing decolonial work, we need to first establish, what are the current discussion about that certain topic, especially when it comes to trans studies or trans lives in the country. And next, no, I think in Mindanao, no, we have in UP Mindanao, for example, we have Mindanao studies, no, and I think Mindanaoan scholars are really active in questioning colonial perspectives of Mindanao. No, for example, a lot of uh, people in my department are questioning, different colonial uh, images of indigenous peoples in Mindanao. And yeah, yeah, I think that's it, no, na people are doing work, and us as scholars who are interested in decolonization or decolonial thing, we need to read these people and also question those existing notions of what is what how do we define, the decolonial how can we define decoloniality, or how can we define colonization in our context. So we need to start with that, and what are goals of decolonizing everything, what are goals. And I think in the field of trans studies in the Philippines, or if there is a field of trans studies, we're not that we are not wala pa tayo dun sa part na yon. Because again, and I think Luis will agree na hindi wala pa talagang trans study sa Pilipinas, no, na and I think ang malaking ang go well I think ang trans studies kasi magpe-play siya ng malaking role, no, in decolonizing a gender discussion in the Philippines because of how broad, no, na trans theories, no, or trans studies in particular, or trans studies, no, in general sa pag-discuss ng mga bagay na ito. And I think na pag-iiwanan yung Pilipinas sa ganung part. So yun, I think ayun yung muna yung akin. Thank you.
No, yeah, thank you for sharing. No, I think it's very important to stress. No? I think in global scholarship, trans has been recognized not just as an important identity or experience, but also sort of as a positionality or an analytical lens to critique certain or long-standing or hegemonic ways that we've understood not just gender relations, but also experiences of everyday life, from health, diba, from in certain cases, diba, in the Philippines, commuting, going to the bathroom, no, even the seemingly mundane experiences, the trans critique of these realities is, as you've mentioned, very, very important. So thank you for sharing that, no? Xavier, in your case, no, how has statistics sort of made sense of coloniality if they have, no? And how has that affected, no, how they respond to gender issues in particular?
Medyo hirap siyang sagutin. I think yung sagot ay wala pa masyadong, well, there are no strong like moves to decolonize statistics. In fact, when you look at the recent works na mas quantitative in nature or gawa ng mga statisticians, you can see na yung idea of of having a certain group of people being more superior than others, medyo pinaperpetuate pa rin ng mga pag-aaral na ginagawa ng mga statisticians. I'd like to discuss yung dalawa. Yung una ay patungkol sa indices and rankings kasi nabanggit din ni Dr. Sharmila yung resource distribution and paano ito nagagamit para siguro i-distribute quote-unquote in an objective way yung ating mga resources na maaaring hindi siguro equitable. And nabanggit din ni Miss Malaya yung labels. Meron din akong gustong banggitin about it at kung paano siguro limited pa yung alam natin about statistics when it comes to grouping people in terms of their gender and sexuality. Yan, sorry, may ubo ako. But yun, yung limitations ng current statistical tools natin dito sa Philippines. Yung una yung indices and rankings. We do have several LGBTQI equality or social acceptance indices. Global ito. At yung idea nito ay i-rank yung mga bansa on how much equality or how much acceptance for LGBTQI people meron sa particular country or particular area. Yung Philippines usually nasa gitna siya, second quartile, around upper middle. At yung scores natin usually around 6 out of 10 or 60 out of 100. And I think yung ilang problems dito ay una, who gets to decide what LGBTQI equality or acceptance means? Ano ba yung mini-measure natin in the first place? And if you take on a positivist stance, you will believe na merong essential or iisa lang yung ibig sabihin ng LGBTQI equality and that you can measure it perfectly. But when you look at the publications na nagpo-produce nitong mga indices na to or rankings, they are often done and led by white folks, funded by Global North institutions. And I'm not saying that this is wrong or hindi mali yung ginagawa nila. Sorry. But the point is that what LGBTQI equality or acceptance means to them may be different to what it means to us. For instance, often in these indices, yung mga mini-measure nila ay like laws and public opinion. Ito yung tanging in-include nila because of methodological reasons and feasibility. But here in the Philippines, given yung inaccessibility rin ng justice sa atin for a lot of folks, especially poor folks, and yung cultural context din natin na mahalaga yung relationships natin with our families, having LGBTQI responsive laws may not be our greatest indicator of or strongest indicator of acceptance. And maaring mas mahalaga for us to say that there is LGBTQI equality if our families accept us. Sorry. Second, if we combine several measures into a single score, yung usual na hindi tinatanong ay how do we combine these measures? Ano yung weights na ginagamit natin? Kasi mahalaga rin isipin natin, hindi lang kung ano yung mini-measure natin, but also how we combine them. At yung aking tanong actually lagi sa mga may ganito endeavor, do we really need to combine them? What good does it make to be able to produce a single score with which we can rank countries? Kasi at the end of the day, if you want to create change, hindi mo naman kailangan necessarily sabihin na mas pangit dito sa bansang ito over the other. Kasi if we are able to pour global resources into countries that rank lowly, then we can say na possibly productive use ito ng statistics. Pero paano naman yung mga countries that do need the resources but rank fairly, based on these arbitrary standards? And also, I think I'd like to point this out kasi when I have this discussion with some LGBTQI folks here in the Philippines, sometimes these rankings make us feel bad about ourselves. So parang hopeless yung ating bansa. Diba? Na mas maganda talaga sa ibang bansa than dito. So I think yun din yung isang danger ng pagkakaroon or paggamit ng mga ganitong uri ng statistics to produce certain knowledge. And also how do these rankings perpetuate our own biases against certain groups of people? Usually sa mga rankings na ito makita mo mas mababa yung score ng mga poorer countries and Muslim majority countries. So paano nito naapektuhan din yung pagtingin natin sa ibang tao? And usually we don't think of these questions. And also if we uncritically focus our data efforts, dito sa mga global standards na ito, how then can we respond to our own local needs and priorities? So yun yung una about rankings and indices na I think hindi pa masyadong critical yung mga statistician sa paggamit nila. And also, when it comes to measurement, meron ding ilang difficulties that we encounter resulting from the prevalence of Western knowledge in our sciences. Unang-una na dyan yung how do we measure gender and sexuality. Pasensya na sa mga quali folks dito, pero sa quanti, we really do need to measure in one way or another. In other words, how do we ask people about their sexual orientation and gender identity? Very important sa quanti yung categories. I know that categories are limiting, but I do think that they can be sometimes productive if appropriate categories are used in a certain way. But usually in quantitative studies, yung direction natin is to adopt Western constructs and labels. Sexual orientation and gender identity, usually they are viewed as distinct constructs, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, straight, woman, man, non-binary, yan yung mga labels na ginagamit. Operationally sa survey, sa pag-aaral, you would have around 2 questions. Isa para sa sexual orientation, then another for gender identity. Then yung labels mo yung options or yung choices. And often than not, we develop the survey questionnaire in English. Tapos we translate it into other Philippine languages. On the surface, mukhang okay ito, logical and sound. There are many ways to ensure na we get the meaning across. Pero sabi nga ni Dr. Sharmila rin kanina, when we do some translation, di ba, merong meaning na nawawala na hindi natin communicate. And I experienced this because we did a national survey recently with LGBTQI people. And when we got feedback from our survey coordinators, merong difficulty when it comes to recruiting LGBTQI participants kasi some of their friends will identify as LGBTQI pero when you try to categorize them using these Western categories, hindi sila neatly nagfo-fall into place. So ito actually yung ginagawa namin ngayon ng isang colleague ko from Department of Psychology. I think nandito siya si Dr. Jose Antonio Clemente. So we are investigating the congruence or alignment of sexual orientation dimensions among Filipinos. So paano ba siya tinatanong? And yung nakita namin ay may general congruence tulad ng sa Global North countries. Pero when you zoom into LGBTQ folks, unlike in Global North countries, merong larger incongruences. In short, what these labels mean to us may be different from what they mean for people in Western countries. At kapag pinilit natin gamitin yung Western labels na ito, pag pinilit natin gamitin, we might exclude certain experiences of being LGBTQ, quote-unquote, dito sa Philippines. Currently, yung tanong ay, meron bang suitable alternatives? Wala pa kaming sagot doon. That is an empirical question we are still working on. But I think these are important questions that usually ignored when it comes to using statistics.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Saber. And thank you, everyone, for sharing. What I'm hearing now is really two salient points. One is that sort of the positionality or the space within which we're doing gender studies is very important. It not only affords context for how we make sense of gender and gender issues, but it also informs, for instance, how the research is done, right? The other is obviously, and connected to that as well, is sort of the process of decolonization, right? Wherein, in relation again to the positionality or the space, wherein coloniality thrives, we have certain fields like anthropology and statistics that are either colonial in its origins or continues to be colonial. No, wala pa masyadong progress. But it's also within these spaces where we're seeing some form of resistance, some form of challenge to these colonial structures, which also just goes to show that decolonization is a process. No, it is not an end state. No, if an end state to decolonization can even be achieved. But siguro since we're in that discussion of the process, no, of decolonization or engaging in decolonial work, I guess the good question to ask now is, as a Filipino scholar, navigating gender studies. So, what are some of the challenges of navigating, challenging, resisting against, the colonial structures, colonial logics, that you contend with in your work? Maybe Malaya can start.
Yeah. Siguro ang first na challenge no sa pag-decolonize quote unquote ng work no, sa gender studies is really yung pag-identify muna no ano yung mga sasabihin natin colonial logics, ng mga colonial narratives. So, at paano siya nakaapekto doon sa kabuuan ng field. No, yun yung I think unang step. And next ay ano yung goal no ng pag-decolonize? Na sino ba yung gusto nating magkaroon ng benefit dito? For example, nag-agree ako dun sa sinabi ni Doc Sharms kanina no, na the language we are using to write our articles is one I think one factor siya sa usapin ng decoloniality. No, kung nagsusulat tayo halimbawa sa English and kanino ba tayo nagpa-ponder kumbaga na ano no, saan tayo. Oh, so sino yung parang target market, quote-unquote, natin. And siguro, ang isang challenge no, sa pag-resist ng coloniality ay doon na sa part ng mga participants, so, ng mga research na ginagawa. For example, me, I'm doing a trans research. So my participants are trans women in Davao City in particular. And it's hard, no, na you are what you want is to really do or to understand the transness in a Filipino setting, in a Filipino context. But their mind or a lot of trans women are thinking that their idea of beauty or the idea of transness is to pander to the Western standards, no, uh, and Western standards of beauty in particular. So it's hard, no, and you need really to be critical on how paano mo i-treat yung data na yon. And so may mga ganong factors na kinakailangang bakahin, no, ng isang, I think, as me, no, as an emerging researcher, na early career researcher, kinakailangang maging mindful dun sa mga ganong realities sa field. So halimbawa, I can cite in one example ano sa issue na yon. I'm currently doing a research, no, on transitioning experiences of trans women in Davao City. And sa nakasanayan nating or sa mga naririnig, yung nakasanayan nating idea of transness, ang gusto ng mga trans women ay quote-unquote na magmukhang babae, or ang katawan ay maging babae, no? Akala natin ganun eh. Pero through careful na pag-interviews, participant observations, the in-depth interviews, makikita mo na actually they don't mind if kung ano yung look nila. But it's the pressure, no, from the outside world, no, from the Western capitalist society, yung nagpo-push sa kanila na mag-undergo with these transitioning processes, no, transitioning processes, no, na they take pills, they take hormones, they do surgeries, no, bottom or top surgeries, just to please the society, in short. And I think you need to be critical with that, because kung hindi tayo magiging mindful sa ganung mga details, akala natin ganun lang yung transness eh, 'di ba? Akala natin transness is just this, 'di ba? They want to present themselves sa kung ano yung gender identity and sexual orientation nila. Pero hindi, no, merong ganung layer of transness sa Philippines that hindi natin yun makikita kung colonial, again, yung pag-intindi natin ng transness. Kaya yung sinabi ko kanina na one way of decolonizing the trans studies in the Philippines is really to read first to ano yung mga discussion. So for example, yung book ni Mark Johnson on transgendering Southern Philippines, so sa mga bantut, kailangan yun balikan. No? Ano yung discussion doon? No? Tama ba yung pag-equate niya ng mga bantut sa usapin ng transness, ng transgender? Or yung bakla, ano talaga pang derogatory yung term na bakla? No, paano natin yun maiintindihan? No, yung paggamit, for example, ng mantifuwalay, di ba, bilang sinasabing taduray term na pwedeng pa-equate for transgenders. No, kailangan yun tingnan muli, no, para maka-establish tayo kung ano ba yung talagang gusto nating marating nung decolonial na movement ng gender studies sa Pilipinas. And I think mahirap siya, no, mahirap siya, no, given na again, nakakulong yung gender studies sa Pilipinas dun sa SOGI SC LGBTQIA+ na framework. Na I think ako, nung nagsastand ako sa ground, na kinakailangan yung i-interrogate. No, I think it's not really helpful, no, to fight for the LGBTQ rights, for the decolonial perspective on gender, kung mananatili tayo sa ganong framework. Yun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Charms, would you like to go next?
Sige. So this is when I said kanina yung politics of location is really relevant to me kasi syempre I'm teaching in a global North University, pero I also do teach in UP Women's Studies. So in that case, my students are Filipino. Overseas, it's an international cohort. So nag-iiba-iba yung intellectual remit in some ways. So ikwento ko na lang yung experience in LSE, right? So I agree 100% with earlier what Xavier was saying, na gender structures reality, right? And gender is used as a tool in a civilizing mission. Constantly, gender is used to establish a moral hierarchy among states to justify imperialist projects. Yung invasion of Afghanistan was retroactively justified as saving Muslim women, right? We see again pinkwashing happening in the context of Palestine and Israel, where constantly Palestine is depicted as this backward, barbaric, anti-LGBT society. Therefore, it is probably okay for Israel to eliminate them. I'm sure if you ask the queers in Palestine, and queer here is an imperfect translation, I don't think they will say that they want to be bombed to be saved. But anyway, gender is used as a stabilizer of these civilizing missions. In global south backward, and that's where the rankings and the indices also come in. And the West is somehow this gender equal utopia, right? And this is not just about gender, even like politics, like the US calls itself as the biggest, land of the free, but their politics is actually very, very liberal, for example. So, syempre, as a scholar in the global north, I really want to resist that, right? I don't want to play the role of a useful puppet who also just keeps critiquing the global south and kind of feeding into that rhetoric. And so I always challenge that by reminding a lot of times that gender binary laws are usually a colonial inheritance, for example. So the global north cannot just now look back and say, oh, we are morally superior. Second, that if you trace anti-gender movements around the world, a lot of their funding comes from Western evangelical organizations, right? So who is the poison really? If you look at the increasing restrictions on abortion in the United States, high rates of domestic violence, so it's really pushing back against this idea that the hierarchy is real and saying what is measured and what is not measured. So when you measure conflict in countries, wala namang measure of who starts the wars first, right? Who makes the conditions for gender minorities more difficult in conflict situations. So kind of pushing back against those metrics and that civilizational mission. But at the same time, and this is where it gets hard, at the same time, I don't want to feed into the hierarchy, but I also don't want to romanticize the local. So parang ang hirap nun, diba? I also don't want to pretend that the local is not a problem, that there are the local in the sense of the global being the global north, but that's not how we should think about it. We should be thinking about everything as local. But I also don't want to romanticize the Philippines, right? So paano yun? Why? There's a danger of essentialism. So it's a reverse danger that I don't want to reproduce. Medyo critical nga ako of methodological nationalism rin. And also local tyrants also weaponize gender for their own interests, right? They also point to feminists and LGBT individuals as Western poison naman. So and sila na naman, they also use the language of decolonization actually to justify these oppressive practices. So paano yan? Kind of like holding space for all of these multiple levels, diba? At mahirap siya, pero we cannot simplify We cannot feed into the binary kasi delikado. So I think to me, the intellectual challenge, and I always say this to my students, I understand that for activists, it's harder to do this. Kasi sige, subukan mong mag-tweet ng super complicated thing na ganon, mami-misrepresent ka kagad and it's going to blow up, right? And that's why academic spaces are so important because there is room for this kind of nuance. There's room for this kind of layering, right? Of refusing the tyranny of simplification. So to insist on a multi-sided, multi-directional critique, diba, na there are no saviors, there are no victims, there are no villains necessarily. And so, of course, we challenge where the vulnerabilities come from. And I can give examples in my work on anti-trafficking and indicators later in the Q&A, but also without exonerating the local, right?
Thank you for sharing. I think that's a very poignant insight, especially I think in Philippine studies, which I would say has been long-standing in the country, as sort of the cradle for some form of decolonial thought, and practice, owing to the fact that there are many ways to decolonize. But again, again, the sort of return to the local also requires some form of wherein returning to the local isn't necessarily decolonial always, because we might have internalized or internal colonial logics as well that are left, unaddressed. No? Xavier, would you like to share, some of the challenges in your field terms of resisting or challenging colonial logics and structures?
Maganda yung point ni Dr. Sharmila no, na actually that is like same question I always ask. Kasi of course Philippines isn't ideal. Marami tayong problems dito. And I think yung challenge ngayon ay how do we use statistics to empower people to bring about change instead of feeling inferior to others. And medyo tricky siya kasi of course, you don't want to invisibilize certain problems that we have, certain issues that we have. But at the same time, ayaw nating maging priority yung problems na sa tingin ng Global North ay dapat priority natin. I think that is the like one aspect I'm trying to problematize as a scholar na parang I know some of the for example indicators that we measure very important to look into. Pero yung tanong ay eto rin ba yung mahalaga para sa mga Pilipino? Kasi baka we are putting our efforts into problems that may not be important to us. But at the same time, kung yung mga problems ito ay hindi important, sino yung mag-iisip sa kanila? Sino yung try i-address itong mga problems na ito? Kasi it might not be important for a lot of Filipinos, but for some Filipinos, di ba? For Filipinos na certain group, it might be important for them. So that is like a tricky balance na hindi ko rin sure if I would have an answer, but I don't think that's the point of it. I think the point is like we continuously ask ourselves about that problem. And I think as a scholar naman, so that is like doing the scholarship. But as a scholar, I think yung isang pinaka main challenge that I encounter, especially as an early career researcher, bilang medyo bata pa tayo, I think that the reputation of a scholar as viewed here, in the Philippines, even in the field of statistics, is on how well you communicate with Western audiences, kung gaano karami yung napapublish mo sa international journals or yung talks mo sa prestigious universities that are often Global North universities and getting funding from international institutions. Kasi usually good reputation comes funding, career stability, allows you to do what you want to do. And you are not likely to get promoted or get substantial research grants when you just work with local community organizations. And that is my dream, di ba? Kung I can just do that my whole life as an academic to solve social injustice or help them develop knowledge. Di ba? That is my dream. But I won't get promoted or I won't get funding if that is my priority. So yung problem ngayon as a scholar, as an academic, is meron kang two different priorities. One that panders to what Global North institutions want, and another that values what local communities need. And in the ideal world, itong dalawang ito ay aligned, but in reality, sometimes they are incompatible. So hindi ko rin alam how to resolve this. Probably some of the more experienced academics have like ways of dealing with this problem. But this is something I think na problem that it's important to think about because medyo mahirap din dumating yung point na I will get used to prioritizing, publishing in international journals just because it will advance my career. Tapos magsasuffer yung mga Filipinos that I work with, di ba? Kasi at the end of the day, kailangan ko rin tanungin, para kanino ba yung research na ginagawa ko? So yun, siguro yun yung thoughts ko about that question.
No, yes, thank you for sharing, Xavier. No, I think that's a concern that a lot of academics have, especially those who
Mhm.
are engaged scholars
Yeah.
na they really strive na may policy orientation or policy implications yung research nila, no? Um, I was in a recent conversation with other gender activists, mga LGBTQ groups, no? I'm talking about yung anti-discrimination bill. I think you were there as well, Xavier.
Mhm.
And one of the parang potential solutions, oh, should we do a census for the
Mhm.
LGBTQ
Mhm.
plus community, diba? And sort
Mhm.
of yung pandering to numbers, as a way
Mhm.
to sort of legitimize problems. No, I
Mhm.
think that is a parang perennial concern for scholars who do research with and for marginalized communities na it might be hard to get the numbers that make, the suffering legitimate. But it is
Mhm.
again, like you mentioned, um, it is better to work through the problem than to arrive at
Yeah.
one solution,
Mhm.
no? But yeah, thank you for sharing. Doc Nikki, in your case po, what are some challenges that you've experienced, no, in resisting coloniality in your work?
Thank you, Luis. I think totally agree now with the points mentioned. But I just want to re-echo yung obsession with the numbers. And of course, when you obsess with the numbers, it will always be, well, your sample maybe is not enough, and maybe this is not relevant. And that is what we're trying to, you know, to make people see na hindi yun ganun kadali, right? There are communities na hindi nasasama sa research just because they cannot reach your number, right, as you said. And I also think yung theoretical challenges na binabanggit ng ibang panelists, it's very connected to the practical, eh. Because how can you forward conceptually if you cannot publish, and before that if you cannot get enough funding? Because if you want to do in-depth studies, you want to involve a community, you want to share findings, widely, um, that's important. And so the financial barriers are actually reinforcing the dominance of Western perspectives, right? If we don't get the funding that we need. So it's a struggle, right? We want to bring more diverse, localized viewpoints into the conversation. And of course, that's why we keep on applying, we keep on trying, right? And once we receive the funding, we try to maximize it as well. No, but maybe I'll add another dimension into the conversation. I think the process itself. Maybe I'll mention about ethical considerations. No, resisting coloniality for me it also involves ethical considerations. And when we say that, as a Filipino scholar, I'm based in Singapore, but I want to do and continue doing research. Recently, I went to Sabah doing some project about Filipinos in Sabah and things like that. But I also want to ensure that my research does not replicate colonial extractive practices, and we're very critical of that, right? How visa permits and all makes Philippines like very easy access. Now it gives easy access to other scholars, which is, that's fine if they want to study, but how about us? Now may mga limits. So with that, I think it's just about us trying really our best to center the voices and the experiences of the communities that we are trying to represent in our writing. So yeah, we want to be respectful and empowering in the process. And yeah, that's a consideration that's very important for me as a scholar.
Right, right. Thank you for sharing. I think it's very important, no, as researchers to really elevate yung ethical considerations, not just in terms of the participants, but also in relation to the reflexivity of the author and how the research in general or as a whole is being conducted, where what are the underlying assumptions for including certain groups of people, and excluding groups of people, for the most part, it's framed from a theoretical, no, or practical standpoint, even the exclusion criteria in studies. But there are also ethical implications and dilemmas that, gender studies scholars have to contend with, no, na parang, oh, if you use, for example, again, this particular category, no, which is Western, right? That is not only arbitrary, but it also has implications for who is allowed to join the study, who is allowed to participate, to be heard, no? Or in that case, sort of on the ethical and practical aspects of research as well, where Filipino scholars, you know, who they struggle to do research elsewhere. But other scholars from other countries, they can freely go here and do research without worries. Now they have access to so many grants, and the research does not get returned even to the communities. So thank you for sharing those points that I think are really left out of discussions, even when they talk about research ethics and whatnot. No, um, again, since we're talking about the process, no, of under or sort of engaging in the colonial practices in the academe as it relates to gender studies, figure, maybe we can all share some practices that we've developed or learned that have helped identify the colonial logics and structures, or in some cases, even challenge or resist against coloniality. Doc Nikki, would you like to go first this time?
Yeah, definitely. I just remembered something when you were summarizing some points. When conducting research, no, it's not just about us doing research in Philippines. I think there's value in doing comparative works. Because I also found that doing these kinds of comparative studies is an effective strategy for challenging coloniality, like by comparing gender issues across different cultures or regional contexts. We can highlight the unique aspects, right, of gender experiences. Na minsan ay na homogenize, in global discussions. So yeah, I do comparative work, but it's not easy. Yeah, there's a lot of funding issues again with that. And of course, I did study in Malaysia, and you have to apply for research visa and also so that. But yeah, comparative work, it will really help us to examine colonial legacies, and how they show up in different contexts, and commonalities, challenges. It's gonna help us with that analytically. And then, of course, may sense of mutual learning kasi, diba? When you do comparative work. So, I did that for my PhD project, and I try to continue doing it. But then, aside from fun, time, no, is very essential for projects like this. So yeah, and I think one more thing, na very useful, no, I think for me, nasabi ko na kanina, sa training sa Women and Development sa Philippines, collaboration talaga ang isa sa mga takeaway ko, no? But one thing sa practical sense lang, sa mga conferences, when you attend workshops and all around table discussions, I think it's useful to attend panels led by Global South scholars or neighboring countries. I recently attended a workshop in Indonesia, and yeah, listening to our fellow Indonesian, to the Indonesian scholars will really help you reflect, no, the experiences of Indonesia and kung paano siya same or not sa Philippines. And of course, that will also lead to collaborations. All right. So yeah, I think this kind of listening, really taking that seriously is important. No, it's tempting kapag may mga malalaking conference to go to the panels na may mga big names, no? But why not listen to the ones, no, na merong grounded experiences as well, and maybe not yet known because maybe their journal articles are published in Bahasa Indonesia, So you learn so much by carefully listening really to other scholars from Global South as well. So that's for me.
Thank you, Doc Nikki, for sharing. Malaya, would you like to go next?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with Doc Nikki dun sa part na kinakailangan din no ng comparative na pagtingin no, sa mga bagay-bagay. Ako naman no, sa field ng trans studies, sa trans anthropology, una kong kina-question din talaga is yung methods no na ginagamit ko. Ah konting disclaimer no, hindi pa ako nakapag masters no, so fresh hindi naman fresh. No, 2020 ako nag-graduate ng bachelor's degree. So pero nasa point ako ng pag-question ng methods no, kung nung nakasanayan nating methods, 'di ba? Syempre, kapag nagtuturo ng qualitative research, yung binabasa natin, written no by mga scholars no from the global south. So we need to interrogate those methods if applicable ba siya sa realities to ng mga pinag-aaralan or mga informants, respondents natin sa Philippines. So that's first for me, no, to interrogate the methods. And siguro it's not one pagsisimula yung pag-interrogate ko ng method so sa ginagamit ko na halimbawa yung informed consent, mga information sheet, no, accessible ba yung language, paano mo ini-explain dun sa mga informants kung ano yung research, ano yung gains nila sa pag-participate sa research mo. So may mga ganong bagay na ginagawa. O kinakailangan mag-reflect dun sa ginagamit na methods no, na hindi lang kumukuha ka ng idea, hindi ka lang nag-exhaust nung mga data from your participants, kung hindi alam din nila no, kung ano yung stakes nila dun sa pag-aaral na ginagawa. And second, and I think important din ito, yung pag-interrogate din ng forms no, ng mga sinusulat natin no. Ah, halimbawa sa trans studies, 'di ba parang important na interrogate mo yung form no, kung well, liban sa halimbawa applied trans studies siguro na merong iba din silang form. Pero dun sa theoretical na aspeto ng trans studies, kinakailangan i-interrogate yung form ng pagsusulat kung hindi ba siya nagfa-follow dun sa tinatawag nating mainstream academic standards ng writing. 'Di ba na medyo rigid, medyo hindi immersed yung nagsusulat doon sa data mismo. So may mga ganong kailangan pag-interrogate din sa form. And me personally, what I'm doing no is really to parang mag-incorporate no, ng creative works doon sa academic scholarly works, because by doing that no na napapakita natin ano yung stories ng mga participants, ano yung stories ng mga trans individuals without us parang comparing their stories sa mga existing published scholarly works. No, ipakita lang kung ano yung buhay nila, ano yung realities nila. So I think one way of doing that, in my experience, is really incorporating creative works doon sa mga ginagawa kong studies about trans women in Davao in particular. And uh lastly, no, yung pag-share no, nung nakuha nating knowledge, nung nakuha kong knowledge. So tama yung nag-agree din ako sa sinabi ni Doc Nikki kanina na we need to attend conferences no, sharing kung ano na yung mga usapin no, sa pagdating ng usapin no, sa halimbawa sa trans studies sa Pilipinas, no, ano na yung nararating ng mga ganong discussion, no, paano tayo uusad no, sa pag-intindi ng mga trans women beyond dun sa gender affirming care, beyond dun sa usapin ng katawan. No? So may mga ganong kailangan gawin. And yun yung I think no ginagawa ko sa kasalukuyan. Yun lang, thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Malaya. Xavier, would you like to go next?
Yes. Siguro 2 points na nakita kong helpful practices, at least for me, para i-resist yung coloniality din. I think pinakauna ay engaging with qualitative research. So it doesn't mean, well, as a statistician, it doesn't mean I will do qualitative research because it's not my expertise, but it means like reading qualitative work, being able to understand it, being able to appreciate it. Sorry, because I think there are strong decolonial efforts in some qualitative research, and we can use these to inform the way we do our quantitative work. In fact, yung aming ginagawa ngayon na work on sexual orientation, measurement research ng sexual orientation, marami nang nasabi yung mga qualitative researchers natin tungkol dito. For example, si Sir Janiel Garcia, you have Dr. Mira Ofreneo. Marami na silang nasabi, and we can learn so much. We can enrich our our quantitative work if we know how to read, appreciate, and understand qualitative research. Hindi kasi ito masyadong nabibigyang focus sa mga mas quote-unquote quantitative na fields, usually yung mga STEM fields. And I think may shift na kailangan mangyari para mas mapalawak yung understanding ng mga statisticians and quantitative researchers pagdating sa idea ng knowledge production, and we are able to appreciate and incorporate what qualitative research is contributing to a particular topic that we are doing. And also, I think yung pangalawa na nakita ko very helpful for me. I'm very lucky kasi statistics yung inaral ko. So I'm lucky in a way na I'm knowledgeable about the statistical tools and models as expected at a philosophical level, not just in a mechanistic way. Kasi usually when statistics are being taught, yung mga tools na ginagamit natin, pati yung mga models, mas ano siya, paano siya gamitin, how to interpret, and so on. But being able to understand these tools and models at a deeper level actually allowed me to understand the limitations of these tools and quantitative knowledge we generate with them, and ultimately gives me a broader understanding of the world. I mean, in terms of the outcomes we measure, the numbers we generate, bilang produkto sila ng mga konteksto and processes in which these statistics are generated. So I think those are the two things na helpful. And I think kailangan din ng structural changes to be able to make these practices more apparent to those who use statistics, those who do quantitative research.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Charms, would you like to go next?
Oh, so I love what everyone else has already said. So these are like slightly inchoate ideas. The first thing, which might actually be controversial, but I will say it anyway, which is I feel we need to make peace with ambivalence and discomfort, and we need to sit with it, right? Walang uncontaminated spaces. Kahit na gaano ka participatory pa yung ating research, extractive pa rin yan. Like, inherent in the nature of academia is extraction. Inherent in the nature of academia is simplification in order to represent. Hindi talaga siya mawawala. Pero syempre, we should mitigate, di ba? So, and yun lang, kind of accepting that, and once we accept that, once I've accepted that, in some ways it became a bit easier to then look at the spaces in which, we can make a difference. The next thing I will say is I think our generation of academics, the university is an incredibly neoliberal institution, even if we pretend otherwise. Yung sinabi nga ni Xavier na, the publish or perish culture, tapos yung pag-rank ng journals, lahat na yan, di ba? We need to sometimes play the game. Why? Because we need access to funding to be able to fund all these difficult projects, like Nikki said. Pero it's kind of like playing the game and also trying to change the game, which I think is possible. So one example I can give is there is a culture in academia of being very individualistic in terms of generating knowledge, right? Solo authored publications, taking ideas away from juniors, being very mercenary in your orientation, kind of just targeting the top journals. Meron namang balance na pwedeng strike, na I like that my generation of academics, I think we operate in a more collaborative way, parang kind of like critical friends na we are supportive of each other. We have all these gatherings na binabasa natin yung manuscript of each other, generous with each other in terms of providing intellectual labor and time, di ba? So the change starts with us. So kailangan, on some level, kailangan i-resist yung neoliberal culture ng academia. Pero hindi pwede fully kasi we're trying to stay in it for now, right? So yun. And that's what I meant by be comfortable with ambivalence sometimes. The next thing is, I agree with the point on egalitarian research partnerships. And for those of us na medyo are in the position na rin slowly to provide feedback to funders or to design these programs ourselves, I think napaka-importante to ask ourselves, like, ano yung kinoconsider na important output of research? Predominantly, it is still publications, right? But for certain types of research, the groups that we might be working with, less important yung publication in a journal, baka mas important a website, in a museum, or like a local language publication that can be disseminated for advocacy or to laymen, to a lay audience rather than an academic one, right? So kind of incorporating those outputs as part of funding criteria. Pero syempre, nako-co-opt rin yan ng neoliberal metrics. Ganun naman talaga. So kind of also then pushing back pag na-depoliticize siya. And finally, I think there's no way around it. Kailangan mas may, I think, kind of mas may material redistribution within academia. So there are all these grants and partnerships between Global North and Global South scholars to kind of push back at sabihin na, look, the labor has to be equal. The funding has to be equal. The leadership has to be shared. So I super support South-South partnerships, and that's starting to happen now, and that's great. A lot of the money is still in Global North University. So hindi rin natin silang pwedeng pabayaan, di ba? Kailangan may pushback rin against that. So I'll leave it at this for now, I think.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. No, I think there's a lot of excellent work that's being done, not just by the people in this panel, but just people in the field in general. No, and so as I synthesize, if the audience has questions for our panelists, no, before we dive into the last question, feel free to put them in the Q&A so we can discuss them. No? But since we're in the discussion, no, of sort of navigating the academe as a neoliberal, very colonial space, and having to be strategic as scholars engaged or committed to decolonial work. What might be ways forward, particularly at the institutional level, so that academics and the academe in general can further engage in the process of decolonization. Then since Shams was talking about it, maybe Shams, you can start the conversation there too.
Yeah, so I think we resist the individualist model of knowledge production and success. In the context of LSE, I'm a member of the union. Kasi parang for me, that is really the only way, like, you can challenge management and all these neoliberal metrics. I think student-staff solidarity is really important. So increasingly, minimeasure tayo as though our students are clients and customers and as though we are service providers instead of as a community of scholars. So kailangan natin to have those conversations with our students to push back against that. Sa ating reading lists, for example, hindi lang siya about diversity because sometimes embodied difference is not the same as epistemic difference. So kailangan epistemic differences are recognized in our reading. I think even in our classroom models, being a bit more participatory rather than authoritarian as instructors and teachers is also really, really important. Seeing our students as resources too. And kind of challenging this division between academic and creative work nga na sinabi ni Malaya, I think is really, really important, like encouraging more creative pedagogies, more creative outputs. And one thing I will say is when we do these things, we need to get good at defending them. Because the moment we do it, i-challenge tayo ng neoliberal academia, ng Western academia, sasabihin nila, ay, hindi kayo rigorous. Alam mo yun, parang pabebe lang yan. So kailangan marunong rin tayo paano ipagtanggol yun. And to say this is not, like, decolonization is actually the academically rigorous position. The lazy position is refusing to reckon with the legacies of colonization. Kasi dito, in LSE, for example, like, you have all these, like, the British Empire, right? And they will say, why are you such crybabies? Why are you such snowflakes? Why do you want to take down all the statues of, like, people who were involved in slavery in the past? And my response is, hindi kami yung intellectually lazy. it is actually the position that refuses to deal with coloniality that is the lazy position. So but we need to be able to defend ourselves in a rigorous and intellectual way, in terms of when we make the argument for expanding and decentering Western epistemology. So yung challenging. So we also need to do our homework.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those, no? Xavier, would you like to go next?
Well, yung napansin ko, I think na baka makatulong for scholars and academics dito sa Philippines. I think pinaka-basic yung isa is strengthening ng ating academic avenues for communicating knowledge. We do have good journals here, local journals in the Philippines. But yung problem is medyo kulang ng resources, I think, in a way, mabagal yung review process, matagal yung publication process. So I think that's one. Kasi if we are able to have our own academic avenues, then mas may espasyo tayo to talk about things that are important to us and may not be important to global north. And sorry, yung second, I think we need to have a greater recognition of various forms of knowledge and knowledge production. For example, when it comes to promotion or tenure, di ba? Usually ang counted lang dyan yung mga published in peer-reviewed journals. How about if you have an NGO report that is peer-reviewed by community members and by academics and so on? Usually hindi yan counted kasi we just view knowledge in a very specific way. So I think kailangan mas palawakin yung understanding natin noon para rin yung ating priorities bilang academics ay hindi mafo-focus doon sa priorities na possibly imposed sa atin and possibly pina-perpetuate na rin ang ilan sa atin na hindi nakakatulong doon sa pag-decolonize ng ating knowledge.
Thank you. Doc Nikki.
Yeah, hi again. I think I'll just give a short comment dun sa sinabi ni Xavier just now about sa publications. It's a challenge continuing ano lang siya, challenge talaga kasi you want to publish in local journals, you want to popularize what we have in the Philippines, but then you publish there and then no one will read it. Like you want it to be popularized where ba? So wala rin akong solution dito. I'm just saying that it's an issue that we are all facing when we want to produce knowledge, right? So that's a short comment on that. But ultimately, with this question, I want to just say that gender issues are really, really complex, right? So tied up siya with social, economic, cultural factors, no, all at once. So I think it's very crucial, at least for academic institutions to embrace multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary work, and to avoid that kind of gatekeeping or parang methods for this discipline is just for this discipline. No, it won't work like that. Right? So it's important to do multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary work so that you can tackle many layers of coloniality, and how it actually impacts the gender relationships in the Philippines. So, like it's challenging, of course, always, especially ang training, for example, ng mga undergrads ay very to identify anong discipline mo. So it's difficult right? So even I as a lecturer right now here at NUS challenge siya how to introduce multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary kind of work sa mga students. Anyway, so that's one that kind of work. Second is really promoting innovative and inclusive methods, no, in terms of research. So big step na naman yan forward may mga methodologies na hindi talaga fully nakaka-capture ang Filipino experiences or any experiences for that matter. So we try to develop more inclusive methods, may it be creative methodologies and sensory approaches. Yung actually just now I was looking dun sa sinasabi kong roundtable discussion na pinuntahan ko sa Indonesia. And yeah, they're actually using sensory approaches and embodied knowledge through multimodality practices. And I've learned so much attending in that roundtable discussion, no, with Indonesian scholars. So I just feel like this kind of methodologies, of course, i-match natin siya. May training behind it. As Sharmila said, hindi basta-bastang gusto mo lang, di ba? It depends on your research question, and of course, you want to be rigorous in applying that. And yes, the assignment is to write well analytically, right? While trying to use these innovative methodologies. So, may challenge and it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you, Doc Nikki. Malaya.
Yeah, I think ang first siguro ay kailangan munang maintindihan ng mga academic institutions na seryoso ang usapin ng gender, no, na hindi ito basta lang for tokenistic purposes, hindi lang ito for diversity purposes, na may nakataya doon sa usapin ng gender. I think yun kasi yung nagiging problema rin, no, sa Philippines, kasi yun nga sinasantabi yung usapin ng gender, akala ng mga head ng academic institutions madali lang yung gender research, hindi ganun ka-rigorous, nag-any-any, no, kung ano-ano yung mga sinusulat. May mga ganung kailangan munang bakahin. And secondly, kinakailangan din talagang ma-disseminate no, yung mga ginagawa natin, no, yung mga nag-study about gender. No, na, kasi ang decolonization, no, hindi lang siya basta metaphor, no, na hindi lang siya dahil nagsulat ka into this language, hindi lang dahil nag-discuss ka ng ganitong topic, decolonization na yan agad. No, kinakailangan ng concrete action. No, ano yung next, no, kapag nakapagsulat ka ng ganito, nakapag-aral ka ng ganyang topic, ng ganyang phenomenon, ano yung next step? Ang next step dyan, yung research dissemination. Paano natin napapalaganap yung research? And tama yung sinasabi kanina na important halimbawa yung usapin ng halimbawa important yung usapin ng pagpapublish sa mga high index na journal, yung kailangan Scopus something, yung mga ganon, important yon. Pero kinakailangan din nating itanungin sa ating mga sarili, hanggang doon na lang ba talaga no yung work natin bilang mga researchers, bilang mga academics, no? Anong mangyayari doon sa yung mga naging part ng research natin? Nababasa ba ito ng mga karaniwang Pilipino, no? Nababasa ba ito ng mga driver? Nababasa ba ito ng mga construction workers, so ng mga tao sa bahay? Kasi kahit ano pang level no ng philosophical theoretical na discussion natin on gender and sexuality or kung ano man 'yan, hangga't hindi ito nababasa ng mga karaniwang tao, mananalo at mananalo pa rin yung mga sexist natin na mga politicians. Yung marami pa rin bibilib doon sa mga ah, sinasabi ng mga politicians natin na sa TV, doon sa mga hearings nila, marami pa rin tatawag ng sir sa mga trans women. Marami pa rin hindi papayag na papasok yung mga trans individuals sa mga CR, mga toilets kung saan nila gustong pumasok. No, marami pa rin mga students ng mga trans ang hindi makakapasok with their gender-affirming uniforms. No, kasi hindi nababasa ng mga tao yung ginagawa natin. Hindi na naiintindihan. No, kinakailangan muna nating ipopularize yun sa ganung way. And dyan tayo, I think, magsisimula ng seryosong discussion on decolonization. Hindi lang doon sa theory hindi lang sa decolonization bilang teorya, kung hindi decolonization bilang practice. No, I think yun yung kailangang tayaan, yun yung kailangang gawin. Yun lang.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our panelists. No, very important recommendations. Na hopefully the webinar not only sheds light on, but eventually will help start conversations. No, I saw in the registration we have uh many academics who registered and hopefully attended. So sana these are things that you can bring back to your own spaces, diba? And see how can we rethink the way we're doing things in the academe, not just in terms of the research, but how we are supporting research, how we are teaching research, and how we are funding research. No? So we have a few questions na, and I'll just open it to any one of the panelists who would like to respond. So the first one, no, Can you clarify distinctions and similarities of decolonial and post-colonial? Are there political, particularly identity politics, and gender tensions that position debates about these distinctions and similarities? Also a very big question. Anyone who'd like to respond?
I can briefly.
Yeah, go ahead po.
So one thing I will say here is sometimes we overplay the differences when in fact they are actually not that fixed. And sometimes what differs is the shifts in emphasis rather than like inherent absolute differences between them. And within post-colonialism and decolonialism, there are also many, many big debates. So I'm not even going to try to give an exhaustive answer, okay? I'm just going to try to capture how I understand these differences, right? Like, obviously, they have diverse histories. They emerge from multiple locations. Some from former European imperial colonies, some challenging white settler racism. So minsan iba rin yung trajectories, fine. But what is the common ground they have? The common ground they have is that race and gendered colonial practices constitute Eurocentric forms of knowledge production that marginalize other forms of knowing in the world, right? What is their somewhat common ground, but not always? That knowledge production is also political and must always involve the political task of working towards liberation and social justice. So it's not just scholarly and academic. What are some of the tensions between them? One, the relationship to modernity and Western philosophy. So there is a claim that post-colonialism in some ways kind of still makes use more prominently of the tools of modernity and Western philosophy. But I don't know that we can actually claim na walang ganun for decolonization, right? Second, the emphasis on epistemic versus material. There is also the claim that decolonization puts more of a focus on material transformations and post-colonialism is more epistemic lang. I don't again know that I fully agree with this kasi may mga decolonial scholars naman like Walter Mignolo na napaka-epistemic lang din ng focus, diba? So I think those are some of the differences here, like proximity to modernity, saan nagagaling yung theory, and how political is the research. Kasi some people will say post-colonialism is not explicitly political in the way decolonial is. But I also would not necessarily overstate the differences.
Thank you, Charms. Anyone else on the panel who'd like to share their insights? Mukhang na-capture naman ni Charms yung current state of affairs. No? Sige. The second question that we have, which I'll also share in the chat, no, is from Dio Caligua. Given your respective workings along gender studies, which remains othered in some disciplines, have you felt being queerly unbelonged by the prevailing normative conventions of your respective disciplines? For example, in my home discipline, history, I still observe doing queer LGBT studies quite queered. That is to say, questioning the topic's rigor and unbelong. No? Ibig sabihin, questioning its relevant. Anyone who'd like to share?
Siguro ako, share ko lang. Medyo onti yung
Yeah.
nag-aaral ng gender and sexuality sa statistics. Applied, ibig sabihin we study issues or phenomena related to gender and sexuality. Or theoretical, ibig sabihin we study methods and tools that we can use to understand gender and sexuality. So medyo onti sa statistics. So sometimes I feel not othered, but sometimes alone. Kaya usually I work with colleagues from other disciplines kasi I'm sure I'm not the only person. But maybe medyo onti yung may interest sa particular area that I want to study. But siguro yung naging response ko doon, of course I'm still an early career academic. But yung naging response ko is to somehow look for allies within the discipline, within my field, within my school, within my department. And work with those allies to be able to establish some space for me to be able to do my work and my other colleagues to do our work. Yun, I'm also lucky our academic leaders sa aming department, sa aming school, very supportive. So I think we just have to look for those people and also be that person to other academics who might have different interests than we have, and like share the space with them para magawa nila yung research na gusto nilang gawin. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else in the panel who'd like to answer the question?
I know, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, hindi naman sa parang othered, no, sa discipline na, wait, I think, ano lang, given na kaunti, no, yung mga nag-trans study sa Pilipinas, kaunti din yung ka-converse natin pagdating sa mga topics. So doon medyo nagkakaroon ng parang challenge. So sino-sino yung magkakausap, no, paano pinag-uusapan yung mga bagay-bagay. And I think hindi siya parang, hindi siya actually parang sad na dating. It's more of a challenge na kinakailangan mas marami pa yung mag-usap about this kind of topic. So about this kind of yung mga issues. Yun lang.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Xavier and Malaya. So we have a third question from the chat. I'll share it as well. Question 3. About research dissemination, do you have tangible or effective ways to share research with the masses without them being intimidated or attacked for somewhat being opposite with the norms they're used to? So I guess the context is yung research is critiquing gender norms, hegemonic structures. Anyone who'd like to share?
Hi, Luis. Maybe I can respond to this.
Yes, go ahead po, Doc.
Yeah. So while we are promoting innovative methodologies then in doing research, I think we can carefully think of ways also to present our work and to share our work creatively as well with our participants, no? And actually, when we publish and we want them to read it as well, I think that's a bit impossible. You cannot like just say, "Oh, this is my work," and it's in a language that you speak and you can read it. But not really. We know, who has the time. Most of the time, tayo lang ang nagbabasa ng works natin, no? So when we talk about disseminating, um, there are creative ways you can summarize this. Pwedeng poster form, pwedeng through photographs, depende sa data na meron ka. Pwede rin na small documentary, right, na pwedeng mapanood ng mga participants. So these things are actually, yeah, they can work. And at the end, let me just read that question again. Yeah, when you share it and you don't expect na isang share lang ay absorb nila yung lahat. That's not how it works. Pwedeng hindi. And you need to accept that because that's how it is. You present it, you let them think, you give them time. You can return after some time, talk about it again, but if things don't change, you cannot force. You cannot force. I think that's a challenge that we all face. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I guess just to share as well, I think if you're looking for more specific modalities of disseminating your research, it would be good to ask the community that you've partnered with or that you're engaging with. So like in my case, what I do is even before I do the research, and then after the research is done, so my data na my findings, I ask them, what do you think we can do with the findings? No, how can this help? What your organization is already doing? No, so coming in not as a parang, oh, I have this new way of doing things, but more of, okay, I'm a researcher, privileged ako na mag-research ako about your issues. Gamitin natin yung findings so that it's useful for what you might already be doing. No, is it policy advocacy? No, so anong kailangan mo for my research para ma-support yun? Do you need the article published para may quote-unquote credibility yung sa site mo? Or is it more information dissemination? So webinar ba siya? No, or information, educational campaign materials, and whatnot. So I think that would be a good starting point to have a discussion with your communities that you engage with. No, sure, we can have one or two more questions. No, one is from Prof. Mary Roselis. Hi, Prof. Mary. Thanks for
Hi.
joining us. No? So the question is, for community issues, new approaches, in engaged social sciences call for academics to connect with groups on their issues. Co-knowledge generation from their perspectives relate more to social justice and globalization effects. Is the colonization frame then, while appropriate, less significant, generating a single top-down decolonizing approach versus more diverse frames derived from people's kwentuhan? I think Sharms wants to answer this question, and then other.
So Prof. Rosales, we haven't met, I think, but thank you very much for this question. So I think it's a great question, and I grapple with it really a lot of times because there is space to say that decolonization is also intellectually faddish, right? Where did this agenda of decolonization even come from? And sometimes I feel we need to decolonize decolonization. So I absolutely understand where this question is coming from, and I feel the same discomfort. So I agree. I don't think every single piece of work we do needs to then be connected to this kind of self-contained theoretical body of work on decolonization or framed in those terms all the time, 100%. The way I see decolonization as an academic is more kind of like an ethical practice. It's about issues of power and reflexivity. So I know it's a little bit of a cop-out, but basically everything you said here to me would be decolonial practice without having to feed into those academic debates necessarily or use that vocabulary. So if the people I'm working with are using a different vocabulary or kind of like a different cosmology, then that's what we go with. Having said that, I do think, I mean, and there's also like the defensive point, right? Western academia is obsessed with this conversation. So if we don't weigh in and kind of push back, then I mean, in some ways, engaging with it legitimizes it, but in other ways, then we can also craft new directions for it that are more pluriversal, I guess. So this is all to say, I think this is a really good question, and on its own, I wish could be a separate panel conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharms. Thank you, Prof. Mary. Doc Nikki wants to respond as well.
Yeah, can I quickly respond also? Hi, Prof.
Yes, go ahead.
Mary. Yeah, I want to point out also, no, that being critical of coloniality isn't always obvious. You know, sometimes it's really subtle and you might not even realize that you're doing it. But once you start thinking about it more systematically and, you gather empirical data around it, you start to see. No, it's there. It's embedded in so many aspects of what we do and how we think. Just just there, waiting to be unpacked. No, and the more we try to dig into it, the more we can find ways to challenge and deconstruct those colonial influences. So yeah, totally agree with what Sharms said just now. Yeah.
Thank you, Pro. So it's 4:59. So let's just address one more question. No? And then for the other questions, we'll just find a way to bring them to the panelists and then back to the folks. No? I guess this question, no, I think because in the discussion we've had so far, we've alluded to language quite a number of times, but we don't have someone who's from linguistics or language studies. No? So may tanong here, no, just in general, how come language or linguistics may be limiting? So when we talk about the language of gender or language in the context of gender studies. Would anyone like to respond?
Ako
Malay?
na lang.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for me, no, halimbawa, ako nagsulat ako sa Filipino. And I think, ano yan parang way of empowering din, no, na we as Filipino researchers or academic scholars no, are capable no, of parang thinking, theorizing this kind of topics. No, I think na meron ding halaga no yung wika or meron ding power no yung Filipino language no, sa pag-craft no, ng mga discourses na ito. Pero hindi lang ito usapin ng language no na kung Filipino English, kung hindi kung paano rin natin tinitingnan no kung paano nagsasalita, paano nakakaintindi yung mga taong gusto nating kausapin, no, gusto nating i-engage no, sa mga ginagawa natin. So I think kaya siya importante no sa usapin ng decolonization, sa usapin ng gender studies, usapin ng trans studies in particular. So I think doon ako nanggagaling no kapag sinasabi nating mahalaga yung usapin ng language, usapin ng decolonization, kasi ayaw ba natin o gusto mo natin o hindi, no, malaki yung impact din ng English no, kung bakit ganito tayo mag-isip, no, kung bakit meron tayong colonial mindset. And one way of doing that is empowering and reclaiming no, kung ano yung halaga nung lingwahe natin or yung wika natin bilang mga Pilipino. And one way of doing that is using our language in doing a research. So para ipakita no na kaya din nating makipag-converse at kaya din natin mag-theorize, so mag-philosophize sa nagamit yung ganong wika. Halimbawa, ilan ba sa atin yung nagsusulat sa sa parang mother tongue talaga natin? No, halimbawa ako, Bisaya, pero hindi din ako marunong magsulat in Bisaya pagdating sa halimbawa scholarly works. May mga ganong kailangang balikan at kailangang itanong. So yun yung position ako. Maraming salamat.
Thank you for sharing, no? Siguro just to quickly respond to that as well. Siguro from a critical discourse analysis perspective as well, language is a very telling parang avenue for figuring out who has power, no? Or and what are the power relations in the context of colonial um structures, logics, and whatnot, no? Ba, sino yung pinag-uusapan, sino yung nagsasalita, paano nila pinag-uusapan yung mga pinag-uusapan, and ano yung ikinalabas nung discussion, no? And I think using language as a means to or parang as an angle to address coloniality is a very powerful, no, parang scholarly agenda, and something that actually one of our research fellows sa decolonial studies, si Prof. Salonga, is doing, no. So there was a webinar about it last year. You can check it on the SID website. But currently, no, it's 5:03 p.m., no, so we've already gone over. I know there are a lot of questions, and in case you have questions that were not addressed or you're still um, marinating in the discussion pero may nag-lurk na question, please, please, please feel free to email us at decolonial.cids@up.edu.ph. Just tell us which of the panelists you'd like, to answer your question. We will try our best, to connect you or facilitate the discussion offline. Pero, I guess, Doc Nikki.
Sorry, one minute lang. There's
Sure.
a comment from Joey. When a UP prof learned my planned thesis had a gender as a central topic, sabi niya, gender na naman, my God, that field is dead, blah, blah, right? Well, lagi-lagi may mga tao magsasabi niyan. Kahit makatapos ka na ng PhD, maging lecturer ka, associate professor, someone will always say that, unfortunately. No? But despite that, we're still here. And
Yes.
we have a lot of colleagues, peers, right? And we're working on gender studies projects anyway. But yeah, Joey, it will always be there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that in itself, no, is a resistance, no, against yung mga colonial logics na, patay na ang gender studies, there's no value in doing it. But that being said, again, if you have more insights to share, questions, recommendations for future discussions, please email us at decolonial.cids@up.edu.ph. No, this recording will also share it. So if you would like to reminisce or review, no, that will become available soon. But I'd just like to take this time, no, to thank our panelists, si Doc Nikki, si Doc Charms, Malaya, and Xavier, as our interpreters, si Jefferson and Brian, and the DSP staff, si Thea, si Jose, and si Ma'am Eileen, no, for facilitating and helping make this discussion happen. No, maraming salamat din sa ating audience for making time and setting aside 2 hours of your life today, no, to listen to our scholarly discussion. Sana may natutunan kayo at sana may mga tanong pa kayo, no. I'll just take this time for our staff to take a photo. No, so if you'd like to open your camera, no, feel free to do so. But yeah, no, siguro our staff will just prompt, no?
Hello po, sige po, bigyan po natin ng time ang people na mag-open ng cams kung gusto po nila. Lagay ko lang po sa gallery. Ayan. So, mag-take po ako ng picture. 1, 2, 3. Isa pa. 1, 2, 3. Thank you po.
Alright, maraming salamat po sa ating panelists, staff, and participants. Ingat po kayo. Bye-bye.
Salamat.
Salamat po.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Prof. Mary.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
weekend. Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend. Bye, Prof. Mary. Thank you for coming po.
Bye. My pleasure.